Welcome to this video, round 2 coverage of the Gashimov Memorial Tournament held in Azerbaijan at the moment in Shamkir. Yes, round 1 was pretty exciting with some wins and some close wins, or games close to a win. This is what I wanted to say. Round 2 wasn't that exciting, I can tell you that right away, being honest with you. Still, I'm doing a recap video. There will be some interesting moments near the end of it, but I'm going through all of the games quickly. Yeah, first game to check is Mickey Adams with white playing Fabiano Caruana, currently world number 2. Yeah, Adams lost the first round game against Kramnik, and Caruana escaped a slightly tricky situation against Mamedyarov. So let's get going. Was it against Mamedyarov? No, it wasn't. Who was white in that game? Forgot who was white in that game. But, well, Caruana had some tricky moments to survive. It was Mamedyarov, right? This was Mamedyarov Caruana. Yeah, okay, let's see. This game. We have 1e4 by Mickey Adams, as he usually plays. And we have the Berlin. Yeah, not exactly the kind of opening that makes you jump from your seats and run around in joy. It's not so exciting in some cases, and this game unfortunately is no great exception. After d3, Adams avoids the endgame. Caruana went bishop c5, and now Adams went for the trade and played knight c3. Yeah, the trade on c6 has been played quite a bit, also by world champion Magnus Carlsen, but he usually continued then with knight bd2 or sometimes a3, h3, or combination of those moves. The knight on d2 seems more flexible than the knight on c3, because here we sometimes have this move, or knight b3, or we can still go to g3. While on c3, and I'm a little bit puzzled there, I have to admit, on c3, it doesn't do much there, so it has to be regrouped. And well, this is a regrouping, but if you want to go to g3, why not do it via d2 f1? I'm not totally certain there. Black is reacting with castles. Yeah, white cannot take there immediately. I mean, theoretically speaking, he can, but it leads nowhere due to queen d4, bishop e3, queen e5, d4, and black is having a good position. Yeah, so white shouldn't take. He just played h3, knight d7. Yeah, this move is maybe not so obvious, but it is fairly typical for the black setup, what black wants to do, keeping the bishop pair. And now we see this c5, a blocking move in the center, preventing d4, and black goes for this regrouping. Yeah, he regrouped his knight from f6 to c6. Very standard type of play. Sometimes black also goes for knight d7, f8, e6, d4. Yeah, there are versions of this maneuver, but essentially it's always the idea to improve the knight, get it to the great square on d4, and this is what happened, knight to d4. Yeah, white essentially in this position only has one pawn break left, that's f4. Yeah, and we see that after a couple of moves, everything that looks very, very obvious, white went f4, or obvious, let's say very standard, yeah, a5, trying to use the rook here, and f4 is, as mentioned, the only pawn lever that white has. So after the trade and a couple of more trades, get to this simplified position where black is now activating his queen, coming to d4. Yeah, it's a situation where it is very difficult for both sides to do anything at all. Yeah, queen e3, queen trade,
check,
and this check here by Caruana. Rook f1 is very logical. Rook a2, rook f2. Yeah, you kind of get the drift. And here they agreed to a draw, or it was a repetition. I'm not sure if someone said it 3 times or if they just agreed on drawing. Yeah, that's not the most exciting chase game ever. But, well, it sometimes happens if both players want to be very solid. I think Adams wanted a quiet game after his loss in round 1. And Caruana with black here. I mean, Adams is not the kind of person to play something fishy against, to try to win some kind of crazy game. Caruana also went for a solid approach, and well, sometimes it's just too sound, let's say, in a situation or in a line like that where you trade on play knight c3. There is relatively little to play for, and sometimes it just never gets off the ground. This kind of game. Okay, the next game I'm going to look at is Kramnik against Wesley. So we have a duel of 2 winners in round 1, and Kramnik is repeating his opening. Actually, he went again knight f3 g3, which is always funny for me to see, because this is what I do play in tournament chess quite often. So Kramnik is often interesting to watch for me, seeing what ideas he has. So he's playing d5 and g6, a line that was very much a backwater 10-20 years ago. Nobody knew of this kind of move order, but Vishy Anand played this against Carlsen in 2013 in their it was game 1 or game 2 of the World Championship match, I think game 1. And since then, people have recognized that this is a pretty decent move order, especially if you have the Grunfeld in your repertoire. The thing is that black playing this quickly, this fianchetto, black basically threatens to push e5. If white is not reacting and plays castles, let's say, black gets in e5, and now he has a nice pawn center, which is pretty much like a reversed Pirz defense, Perk defense. Yeah? It is very, very comparable. Yeah, like a fianchetto variation against the Pirz, where white is very comfortable. Yeah, I mean, not very comfortable, not a huge edge, but it's a very sound setup, and the tempo down doesn't really change matters. Black equalizes here very, very easily. So white is almost forced to do something in the center now, as e5 is a threat in some sense. d4 is what Kramnik played, and this is what almost all of the top players do. You can also play c4, like Carlsen tried it in this World Championship match game. Here black has some options. He can play the aggressive d4. He can play e6. This is what I sometimes play there. I mean, mostly in blitz chess. It's a bit dodgy, this line, a little bit. And black can take. This is the most solid way to play, as Anand played in the World Championship match. Something like that. And black has a very, very decent position. I'm not sure about e5 though. I think they play e5. Yeah, black has no particular problems. Kramnik therefore went d4, and Wesley so now knight f6 for complete symmetry. Castles, castles. Now the most ambitious move is the move c4, and by far the main theoretical continuation. However, this leads to the mainline Grunfeld fianchetto, where black now has the basic choice between taking and playing c6. Now after takes, white plays knight a3, and then black can play knight c6 or can play c3. It's the start of some long lines where in general black is considered to be quite okay. There's also c6, which is also considered to be quite okay. Yeah, Kramnik tries something different. He played knight bd2. It's a somewhat slow looking move, but it has some idea. Wants to go c4 without allowing this particular capture d takes c4. However, Wesley so now as black played differently. He did not play, let's say, c6, which would be possible, and after c4 would be a simple transposition into c4 c6 knight bd2. He played something that gives the position its independent flavor, let's say. He went knight to e4, just centralizing this knight right away. It looks a bit uncommon, or it looks a bit out of the ordinary to move the knight again all of a sudden, losing a bit of time, but this knight move definitely does one thing. It opens up the... Wow, my mouse is acting up. Oh wow, even worse. It's opening up the long diagonal and prepares for play against the d4 pawn with c5, or sometimes maybe knight d7, e5. So opening up the diagonal is not a bad idea at all. It just loses a bit of time. If white now is not playing what Kramnik plays, Kramnik took on e4, you don't have much choice actually. Let's say you go c4 just to show the possibilities. After c4, black has again a choice. He can play c6, transposing into the c4 c6 business. This is in fact a line that is perfectly possible. Or he can decide to take and snatch this pawn. When now we see that this open bishop is doing something, pressurizing d4. For example, let's say rook c1, knight c6, we all of a sudden see that there is some pressure on the pawn. Knight d4 is an interesting idea. Kramnik played in a way, yeah, I'm not saying he tried to refute it, because you pretty quickly see that it is no refutation, but he tried to give it an independent taste, this continuation he took, played knight g5. Here, however, we see, as mentioned, the open diagonal. Black just took the pawn. Kramnik traded and played rook d1, knight c6, and bishop e4. So this is something that was played relatively quickly here also by Kramnik. So it seems that he had maybe looked at this kind of idea before. However, it's not quite clear if he thought that this is giving white something, or if he how it came to this kind of position, why he was allowing it. It's simply equal, is what I'm trying to say. There's nothing much going on. White has a very slight symbolic, let's say, pull because of superior activity. But we see that the pawn structure is entirely symmetrical. Okay, there's a pawn on c7 and white has a pawn on c3. But this is really nothing to write home about. And we see that black is regrouping this knight to d6, covering also b7, and then step by step managed to get his pieces coordinated. The symmetrical nature of the position makes it very difficult to get anywhere. Bishop to b7, knight e5. Yeah, the only thing that black absolutely has to do is to avoid playing something really, really stupid. For example, like taking on e5. That's something that doesn't really help a lot. Yeah, you give white an excellent bishop. Let's say here, king f2. Yeah, and here a situation like this can be tricky for black. Yeah, you have less space. Something like that activates the king. Those kind of things black should probably avoid. It's not like he's losing, I'm not saying that, but this definitely gives white some hope for an advantage. Black has to be very, very modest there, just trying to trade down slowly. And this is what So basically did. Yeah, just some slow, solid moves. White tried to open up the queen side, but here knight b5 was an important counter-attacking move, getting this counterplay going while white was attacking on c5. Yeah, we had even more trades. Yeah, here I first thought when I saw this position, okay, maybe white can try to get something against this somewhat isolated pawn. It's not completely connected to the rest of black's pawn structure, but there is really nothing serious going on. Black quickly gets his king involved, and yeah, there's really nothing going on. At the end, we had even this traded and ultimately rooks traded, after which they agreed to a draw. So this opening idea with knight bd2 and then knight e4 leads to a rather boring position to just be very frank about it. There was simply not much going on. I think Wesley, yeah, it looks like he played in a precise way here in this position. as I mentioned, I think white is a little bit better. So maybe this is what Kramnik was playing for. He just said, okay, I know I'm never ever going to lose this game, and maybe like 2 out of 10 there will be some kind of inaccurate continuation that I might be able to use. So very, very safe kind of play here for white from Kramnik's point of view, but not very exciting to watch from outside, I have to say. Okay, let's go for the next game. This is Anish Giri with white against Rauf Mamedyarov. Let's get going. We have a Slav defense, which is a slight surprise, as Mamedyarov is usually known for his King's Indian. He's playing the King's Indian regularly, and in general is a rather sharp and uncompromising player. It shows in his opening repertoire. The Slav is, it seems, a new addition to his repertoire. He has played it before, just a few weeks ago, but it's nothing that he does regularly. So certainly something that Giri had in his preparation, but maybe not with the super highest priority. You never know. Okay, he went with Queen B3, a line that I also play regularly. Takes, and Bishop G4 was played. Yeah, this line is one of two main responses to this variation, Bishop to G4 or Bishop to F5. Bishop G4 is the somewhat more active continuation, and also the one that I would prefer as black. I mean, okay, I don't play this opening that much, but if I would have it on the board, I would play Bishop G4 there. Yeah, sometimes just intending to capture the knight, maybe get in E5. Knight BD2 is Giri's continuation. This is the most, let's say, sound continuation, or the most strategically focused is maybe the right expression. There's also something sharper, yeah, like Knight C3, Knight BD7, E4. But here it's not clear if concrete play is giving white so much, especially the move E5 is giving white some headache there. It's something that I had recently in blitz games, and white never got anywhere. Knight BD2, as mentioned, is the most strategically inclined continuation. White is preparing this fianchetto. This is why Knight BD2 was necessary. If you go G3 immediately, black would have taken and destroyed white's structure. So we cover F3 so that we get the fianchetto in. All this is very normal looking. Queen B3 attacking the B7 pawn. Black is blocking. And white plays castles. Yeah, it's probably a good moment to talk about this queen standoff. Yeah, who wants to trade, or when exactly? Yeah, we can say the following: white absolutely never wants to trade, as A takes B6 gives black a very decent game. All of a sudden, the A file is opened, which is good for black. He can use the A file, and he has ideas to push the B pawn up the board, and sometimes annoy the white's pieces on the queen side. White definitely does not want to trade. This is almost universally the case. If you have a pawn structure like that and white would trade, or you can also look at this, I mean, think about this with reversed colors. You never want to trade there to get this kind of pawn formation. This is not a weakness at all, but rather a strength, as black is controlling many squares and gets in half open file. In the actual game, white went Knight C4. And again, we can ask the question, does black want to take on B3 or not? It's funny, again, the capture is not a great idea. After A takes B, white here has the idea to continue with the Knight A5 move, which pressurizes B7 and C6. Black is not in a super terrible shape here, but it's definitely quite annoying to play. Yeah, let's say you go A6, Knight A5, and yeah, you have to play somewhat ugly stuff now, like Rook A7. Yeah, because Rook B8 That was wrong. I'm sorry. Not this, but let's see how we can insert this. The point is that rook b8 is failing due to bishop f4. Yeah, so both sides don't want to trade. But black has queen a6. That's a good move. Looking at the e2 pawn. Bishop d2, knight b6. And again, white does not want to trade. Plays rook c1. And black went knight e4. This is technically a new move, a novelty. What was known there was mostly the capture on c4, which also leads to, yeah, to be perfectly honest, something that is very close to equality. Rook c4, knight e4, intending knight d6. This X-ray effect of the queen on the e2 pawn is felt quite a bit. Yeah, white has nothing in particular in this position. Knight e4 is very, very comparable. Bishop e1 takes. Yeah, if white takes with the rook, oops, I'm sorry. White takes with the rook. It doesn't really lead to that much. Let's say knight d6, rook a4, and again queen b6. That's really getting nowhere. Black has an absolutely sound structure with no weaknesses and no particular problem at all. Yeah, queen takes was played, and here the trade. And now we have not an end game, yeah, a queenless middle game, as they say. But it's a fairly tame position where black doesn't have much to fear. So Giri's approach here was a very, very safe one. Yeah, going for a simplified position. Maybe he also had in mind that Mamedyarov is more of a, yeah, tactically focused player. He's a very concrete, direct player, trying to get attacking games going if possible. And well, this is frankly speaking as far away as possible from any attacking chess. It's just a relatively uneventful position. Yeah, and they actually, this didn't happen very much. Black played it well, I think, with f6. Yeah, improving the bishop position a little bit there. Went over here, getting some weaknesses in, and now was regrouped to d5. There's actually, to be honest, not much happening in this whole game. There was a little sequence that was of a bit of interest here. Knight c4 after bishop e7, knight e3. We had a funny trading sequence where both sides took a couple of pieces, but it is still equal material. Black has a good bishop on d5 and no problem at all. Yeah, you can even argue if anyone is maybe a little bit more comfortable, it might be black, but it is nothing serious. They continued this game for quite a long while. Yeah, I won't look at it in much detail anymore here. It's funny, black gave away the a-pawn, but there is no real possibility for white to keep his material. If he goes for knight c4 here, for example, black will just capture and get this pawn back and has no problems whatsoever. b4, and now later with b6 we have a situation where this knight is dominated and only bishop d5 was playable, which after b takes a5 and here this trades led to a completely equal, yeah, endgame with rook and bishop against rook and knight. Yeah, they continued a little bit, but there was really not much happening.
Check.
No side ever got close to anything. Yeah, in the final position here after rook b1, when they agreed a draw, there are many ways to get to a completely equal position. For example, if black takes on f4 here in this line, we have a possible check there and a retreat. Yeah, and here white is always able to attack those three pawns. Very often we would get to a rook endgame like this. Let's say here, and then what are we going to do? Maybe rook b6. Yeah, this is just very equal. Black is getting nowhere here without his king. Yeah, and pretty uneventful draw. I'm not sure, maybe Giri wasn't completely ready for the Slav in this in this game. Of course, they have a repertoire and everything, but maybe he didn't have a particularly great idea and wanted to play such a slow game, trying to get Mamedyarov in some waters that he's not so comfortable with. But he held his own very very confidently. There was nothing ever happening here. Next game is MVL, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave with white against Vichy Anand. Let's go there. Here we go. And we have knight f3. So the very versatile Frenchman going for knight f3. He also plays e4, d4, all moves. And we get a queen's gambit. Rogozin, yeah, the very popular Rogozin variation, played by Anand before, and something that definitely was on MVL's radar here, radar of preparation. Yeah, we get to this position, also something that has been played quite a bit. Now, however, Vichy is coming with a surprise. Not a complete surprise like, oh my god, this is a novelty, but close to it. He plays bishop to f5. And I don't know how much time Vachier-Lagrave invested now. Let's have a look. He played 2 moves here instantly. e3 he played instantly. Okay, and after knight b7 he was thinking a bit. Okay, the thing that I'm getting at is bishop f5 is a very rare move. I only had 2 games in my database, I think, if I remember this correctly, but one of the games is from 2015, and the black player is Mr. Gajewski, one of the top players of Poland, and a second and helper of Vichy Anand. So if you, not that I ever prepared for Anand, but the guys preparing for Anand, they also would check what Anand's related guys play, seconds, trainers, helpers, whatever. And Gajewski was one of the main guys involved with Anand's World Championship preparation. So this move definitely must have been on Maxim Vachier-Lagrave's radar somehow. e3, as mentioned, was played quickly after knight b7. However, he took a long while to come up with a move, and he played bishop to d3. Yeah, this does not look like a stern test of Black's opening play. What we essentially get is a Queen's Gambit declined Carlsen structure with the light squared bishops traded, which never was regarded as particularly threatening for Black in any case. So this is a very harmless move in a way. Something like Queen b3 is certainly more interesting. How would Black's Black setup work in this case? Quite interesting. If Black plays c5, I'm just making up things here, right? I mean, I can only assume what was the preparation there. If Black plays c5, you might argue that bishop f6 or d takes c5 can lead to interesting tactical play. Let's say queen f6, knight f6, bishop b5 is a bit awkward, huh? Yeah, let's say bishop here, bishop d7, queen d7 takes. Yeah, it's not clear that this is helping Black. The d-pawn will be very, very weak in this kind of situation. In most cases, will probably get lost. Let's go back. Yeah, probably queen f6. And now white may take on d5. An interesting pawn sacrifice. However, something that is not new in these kind of positions. Quite often, Black is sacrificing a pawn for good development. Yeah, I think maybe the white player wasn't confident in exploring some of those lines, especially if he didn't prepare it beforehand. One idea or one possibility is also that he had looked at this line at some point but forgot what he checked. After queen b3, by the way, Black also has to move bishop a5, which is interesting because the capture is definitely not that great. Yeah, something. Sorry, Black has to do that first. I wanted to take on b2. In this kind of situation, the b2 pawn is very tricky to defend. Yeah, white has to play like bishop d3 to even continue, but even then black has very, very decent play. So interesting complications, but as it is so often, the first time it is played, the person who is surprised chooses something less principled. Bishop d3. So Vichy just traded and went c6. This is the typical structure of the Carlsbad, how it is called, the Queen's Gambit declined exchange. Yeah, this is something that happens very frequently, and usually black's main concern in this kind of structure is the awkward c8 bishop. Yes, it is open now, it's not looking at a pawn on e6, but it's still a piece that can hardly be, or very rarely can be used actively, and is very often just, yeah, sitting on the color of the pawn chain, and is a long-term liability. Here this is traded, and white has lost his important d3 bishop. So to be perfectly honest, I think this is just equal already. There's not much happening. Rook b1 and b5. Yeah, a typical way to combat the a4 b5 idea, the so-called minority attack. With b5, black is just stopping any a4 b5 ambitions in its tracks. This idea to just play b5 may look a little bit awkward because of the c6 pawn, which is a backward pawn, but on the other hand, what black is doing, he fixes lots of pawns on dark squares, and a knight coming to c4 will probably be very well placed as it attacks the a3 pawn. This setup with b5 against the minority attack is fairly popular and is especially interesting when light squared bishops are traded. Yeah, in a situation where, let's say, there's still a bishop on e2 and a bishop on b7, this is obviously less attractive as the b7 bishop is pretty bad. But here, this is no problem at all. Yeah, white played a4, rook e8, and now traded on f6. This is, I think, a wise decision. The bishop is quite often ending up as a pretty useless piece, as everything is happening on the light squares. a6, b5, c6, d5, and the bishop sitting on g3 is basically pointing into thin air. So traded and a5. It's also quite normal. You control b6 so that the knight is not jumping into c4 quickly. Black is looking forward to that idea, getting the knight to c4, but now it takes quite a while. Yeah, you need to go to d6, which is really long way, like this. Where do you go from there? No, g6, e7, f5, and so on. It's a ton of moves. Yeah, and well, we continue this a little bit, improving. Yeah, and white is coming with this knight all the way here, and now recaptured with the b pawn. The idea of this capture is that this regrouping of the knight will attack the two pawns there, a6 and c6. Here we go. As promised, the two pawns are under fire, but the thing is, black covers that and has still no particular problems. With the doubled rooks on the e-file, e4 is impossible to play, really. They continued for a long while. White was trying something. It's not like he just sat there. Yeah, you see, he's trying to prepare e4 in a very... Yeah, it takes a while, but trying to prepare that. Always keep in mind that whenever e4 comes, here it does come, there is huge pressure here. Just taken. And after some trades, we reach a completely equal position. I actually was a bit too quick here. There was one moment here. I was too quick. There was one moment where Maxime Vachier-Lagrave could have taken the pawn on a6. It is, however, nothing much, because rook a7 sends the knight back immediately, and black gets the pawn back. I just wanted to show this little line. So there was never anything just hanging on a6. Yeah, a very solid draw, which certainly doesn't get anyone very enthusiastic, but those games, as mentioned, they do happen, especially in a situation when we go back there where a new move or almost new move is played. It's kind of surprising. Bishop f5 looks like very normal, just developing this piece. When a new move or an uncommon move is played, that sometimes the choice is a solid one, a simple one that is not testing the idea that much, and quite often leading to somewhat boring game, like here with e3 and bishop d3. Okay, now to the final and most interesting game of this round. The world champion Magnus Carlsen playing white against Shahriar Mamedyarov, the top player of Azerbaijan. Let's get going. Yeah, got a Slav. Very popular opening nowadays. And Carlsen goes for the so-called slow Slav with knight f3 and e3. Yeah, not continuation that looks particularly ambitious, but nowadays is one of white's main choices. The thing is that knight c3, which is the probably still the main line, the traditional main line at least after d takes c4, is currently giving white pretty much nothing, very little. The alternatives to e3 here are pretty rare. There's not much. There's queen c2, queen b3, as we've seen in Caruana's Giri's game with queen b3. That is okay, but nothing great. So white has tried around here a bit, and e3 is one of the moves that are possible there. e3. First thing you say, okay, isn't this a bit of passive? It blocks the bishop. This bishop on c1. Yes, it does, but it is not particularly problematic. If black tries to, let's say, make it better, and play the bishop outside of the pawn chain, which is the main move, then white has this idea where the knight is starting a chase of this bishop. White will very often get the bishop pair in some shape or form. It depends a little bit, but very often white will, let's say, take on g6 in some way. This is a bit accommodating. Bishop g6. Black can also start with bishop e4 or something else. But this kind of thing, white is getting the bishop pair in a relatively close position, and long term, very long term, white might get in e4 and try to make use of his two bishops. This is white's main idea with this slow Slav, that the bishop on f5 is mostly something something that resembles a target and can be traded off to gain the bishop pair. Black has alternatives though, and now the software is actually getting back to where I wanted. Black has alternatives. Mamedyarov plays g6, normal looking move, but not very popular. It is a bit passive, to be honest, and quite surprising that he plays it. Alternatives to bishop f5 are, besides g6, e6, a6. All those moves are normal and playable. Well, g6, let's see. What is this actually? This is the so-called schlechter variation of the Slav. Comes from Karl Schlechter, the Austrian player who was very close to becoming world champion when he drew a match against Lasker. Schlechter invented this setup, which is basically some kind of hybrid between the Grunfeld and the Slav. We have a knight on pawn on d5 like the Grunfeld, but black has not managed to play c5 in one go, but played c6 to just support the center a little bit. Here in this particular position, black has some alternatives. Bishop g4, for example, or he can take on c4, he can play e6. b6 is also a move. That's a flexible move. Black wants to fianchetto, and maybe set up something like bishop to b7, knight bd7, e6, queen e7, ultimately c5. This kind of thing. If white is responding with a slowish build-up himself, he very often will get nowhere. Yeah, let's say a move like b3 or so. This is relatively tame. Bishop b7, bishop b2, knight bd7. Yeah, here black has no particular problem. No? e6, queen e7 being a possible way to continue. White after b6 should do something more drastic, let's say, and Carlsen goes for a4. Yeah, I think this is a good idea, trying to do something with the queenside pawn structure and not allow black to fully develop, and then just be flexible and see what white is doing. a4, a5 is something that black has to attend to, and he went a5, just blocking. This is actually some known position after c takes d5. Now in the game Anand Wang Yue from 2010, knight takes d5 was played. However, after this, e4, knight b4, bishop e3 was played in the game. White, the then world champion Vishy Anand, was certainly a little bit better. Yeah, white has a Grunfeld-like center, which is at the moment not really under any serious pressure, and black has some weaknesses on the queen side. White is definitely a little bit better here. But cd5 is not a move that looks particularly bad, so why not take with the pawn? Carlsen played b3. However, the next move I don't agree with, and well, the computer supports this view. I immediately was quite suspicious, but when you check this with the engine, it becomes clear that this next move wasn't a great idea. Mamedyarov should just probably continue with the developing move, like bishop here or knight c6, something normal. White will always be a little bit better because of the fact that the bishop on e2 is somehow related to the queenside play. Yeah, note that it's symmetrical. The queenside is symmetrical, but what white has, he has a bishop on e2 that can be used on b5 or in any way on the queen side, while the g7 bishop is biting on this d4 pawn that is safely protected. This is often a problem of this variation. The bishop on g7 is not really participating much in the game. In the Grunfeld, when c5 is played, often the d-pawn is removed, even by pawn sacrifice, and the bishop is coming to life. Here it's just looking at a protected pawn. And white, as mentioned, has his bishop that can be used. Yeah, what did Mamedyarov play? He played knight e4. This is losing a little bit of time, moving this knight again. And what it does is, it alters the pawn structure in an unfavorable way. To be perfectly honest, I'm a bit puzzled why he went for that, because the other, or the normal position, let's say, the symmetrical, wasn't very attractive, but have a look at that. The knight has an excellent square now on c4. The bishop for white will activate on a3, while black's bishop is still biting on this pawn, and if black puts this bishop on b7, again it looks at a pawn. So to me it looks immediately very unattractive, this black position, and I'm a bit puzzled why he went for it. Maybe, hard to tell, but maybe he was planning to go e5 in this position, trying to really play it in a violent way, break open the position. If white takes, bishop takes, this might even be feasible, but white has a much stronger continuation after this e5 move. He can go d5. This is a very strong move. The idea is that after queen d5, bishop a3, rook d8, white can take on e4 with a little tactical trick, using also the fact that white is much better developed, and now the white queen has no move as d8 is hanging. Yeah, a very uncomfortable position where white has excellently activated pieces. For example, bishop a6, let's say, queen d5, rook d5, and what are we going to do? Maybe rook d1. The back rank is a problem. White has a huge advantage here. e5 is making things even much worse. So he went for bishop b7, protecting the e4 pawn. But here we pretty quickly see that bishop a3 now, e5 is prevented, f5, rook c1. Yeah, all this is very normal. White has just a far better position. This is a much weaker pawn than b3, and both black's bishop are passive. Knight d7 and d5. Yeah, very nice active continuation. White is opening up the diagonal of the bishop on g7, but he trades in for something else. This push to d6 only leaves black with a very unpleasant choice. He can take on d6, after which knight d6 will probably win this game in very short order. The knight on d6 is just super strong. Yeah, something like this, for example. Yeah, black will not survive this crossfire of pieces. You can either allow the knight to d6 or play e6. This is what Mamedyarov did. He allowed this very strong pawn there on d6. Yeah, now Carlsen goes for opening of the position, played in a very, very straightforward way. Yeah, b4 and a5. We want to open up to ultimately trying to support the b pawn for promotion. Takes. There was no big alternative. Queen e8. And now queen a4. Yeah, here white had a choice. The other move that looked rather promising was knight b6, but I'm not totally sure if it does win. This move is coming a little bit later under somewhat similar circumstances. Something like, let's say, takes and trades is definitely looking very threatening. But I'm not totally sure, queen c7, queen c5, if white is really winning the game. Probably yes, but I couldn't really analyze it to a forcing win. The computer gives white like +1, like 0.9, +1, something like that, but it's not entirely clear if white does win by force. The game continuation, queen a4, is also very, very logical. We use the queen to trying to enter on the queen side. Bishop c6, queen b4, rook b8, and now knight b6. Yeah, it's as mentioned a similar situation. Here black only had one move available. He had to take on b6. After knight b6, bishop b6, queen d7, let's say white is better. Yeah, this pawn on d6 is a very, very nice asset. But I'm not really able to say if it is a total win or just very good for white. Yeah, rook d1, for example, or doubling on the c-file. White is much better, but it's not completely clear if it should win. The computer is giving like 0.8, 0.7. You don't see a clear evaluation. White is much better, but it's not a clear win. In the game, however, it is a clear win. Mamedyarov plays knight e5. This looks more active, but it has a big problem. After queen c5, which was played by Carlsen, white has a substantial threat in bishop to c3. And this really totally disturbs black's coordination, hanging bishop and the diagonal. Yeah, he went bishop to a8 and bishop c3. Yeah, and now the problem is, what is it that black should do in this position? He went knight back. Yeah, there's no big alternative there. Knight d7,
check,
takes,
check,
and the check. That's the big problem. Now the c-file is open and rook c7 will be killing. Yeah, after queen e5 check, Mamedyarov resigned the game. So we have a win in this round after 4 not very eventful draws. There is a win. The world champion has won his game against one of the local players, against Mamedyarov. This game is, if you ask me, basically decided in this particular moment, or let's say here, when knight e4 was played. This just gets black into huge trouble. Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to imagine how black should equalize from here. He's just worse in a structural sense, something that's not going away, and he got under that much pressure that he couldn't defend ultimately. Maybe it was possible with knight takes b6, but after knight e5, queen c5, intending the bishop c3 move. There is no defense. Yeah, let's say if black is doing something else, yeah, he went for this. If he plays, let's say, another move, knight to f7, what happens? White takes. What happens if black plays a waiting move, let's say h6? Yeah, there is bishop c3, there's d7. d7 is also a move. Yeah, it's not so easy to parry. Knight d7, queen c6, bishop takes, bishop c3. And where is this knight going now? It's very tricky, yeah? If it goes to d3, check. takes, check. There's tons of tactical problems in black's position. So it was already not tenable after avoiding knight takes b6 on move 24. And in this situation, after knight b6 here, black could have played a little bit, or yeah, could have played a little bit is wrong. He could have continued the fight and with some chances to hold it, but as he played it, it was a loss. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this coverage of round 2. It wasn't too eventful, but still had some interesting points, especially the final game there of the world champion. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll even be live broadcasting on the ICC. If you are an ICC member, you can listen to Grandmaster Timur Gareev and me commentating on the third round of the event. I'll also do a game of the day or this recap video in the evening European time, as I did for this round. Thanks for watching, and yeah, talk soon or talk again tomorrow. Thanks.